Recording in progress.
Good evening. This is the Chicago Computer Society Linux SIG meeting for the month of March 2026. I hope a few other people would show up, but it looks like we're missing at least one, and Peter will be bouncing probably in and out of the meeting. There's nothing I can do. There you are, Peter. Okay, you got back in. Uh, that's good. Uh, One of the things that I wanted to bring up at this meeting is that if you have a computer using display ports and your monitor does not support display port, you're probably using an adapter. They are notorious for causing audio dropouts. And here's the kicker. In Windows, if it sensed a dropout of the video, it will retry to make connection. Linux does not. And I'm not joking about it. I experienced it myself. I figured out what happened and confirmed it with AI. So you can have a situation with display ports and adapters not always being secure enough. And so any kind of a wiggle of the adapter might cause you to have a dropout of video. You'll get a black screen, and in Linux, it may not come back. You may have to figure out how to shut down your machine properly, or you'll have to do a power button shutdown uh, as a last resort. And when you reboot, you may get connection back again. I find that out because I also have cats, and if one of them brushes the cable, oh well, you find out the hard way. Something I wanted to mention in some previous meetings. Uh, I picked up this mini computer. It was either late December or early January. I don't remember anymore. I was going to bring this up months ago, and I got it strictly for Linux. And it does not come with any memory and no storage. It cost about $52 for the unit, shipping, and sales tax. However, the beginning of March here, I got this small unit here. And trust me, the person who was selling it didn't know their butt from a hole in the ground on these things. And my total absolute cost was $38.11. Again, no memory, no storage. Now, for a lot of you, you can't handle that because, bottom line, you're not a person like I am with lots of computers. I have memory and storage usually quite available to me, which means that I can do testing as soon as they come in and start finding out if everything's working fine or not. That last unit that I had there, uh, it was running on a 4 gig memory module that I do testing with because it's low speed. I don't use it for any kind of production work. It's DDR4 2133 megahertz. And bottom line was the only thing that didn't work was network connection. Neither Wi-Fi or Ethernet would work. And this was running Windows 10 that was already on the storage unit, which I didn't know was there. And I also ran Mint 22.3 from a USB stick and had the same issue. It turned out the CMOS battery was absolutely dead as a doornail. The bad part that some of you may or may not know is you have to be able to take these units apart because it's the battery is, if you take off the top here, you'll see insides that are just shield metal and other things like that. You can't see the battery, but right under that shielding is where the battery is located, along with your fan and heat sink and CPU. Bottom line is you have to turn it over. You have to take out this storage device, and there are two screws near the back of the unit. You have to take them out, and with a little bit of difficulty, you lift up from the rear to pull the board out. The bad part is you have the Wi-Fi antenna leads, and you're going to have to deal with them when you reassemble. But that's the only way you can get to the battery. Then I disconnected it, tested it with a multimeter. It was absolute zero. And I had to order a battery, wait almost a week for that to arrive. Plugged it in, reset the BIOS, and set them up the way I wanted to. Everything worked perfectly fine. So these are a little quirk with just these real small minis. The minis that I normally use, which are this style of a mini, it is easy to replace batteries. You can get to them readily and not have to virtually disassemble your unit in order to get to the CMOS battery. So that's a little quirk that I learned in the last couple weeks. So I'm going to open up the floor, and if anybody's got any other problems or comments, etc., this is your time. Nobody's got anything, huh? Everything's...
Tim,
Yeah?
you need to reboot the whole computer when you upgrade Zoom because it doesn't look like my upgrade stuck.
I've never heard of it not sticking. I mean, you download it and then you click on it to activate it.
Correct. But my sound is fixed, so I don't know what the heck happened. I'll worry about that after.
Well, understand that if it didn't stick, as you put it, then that's a potential problem. Or it may be a problem. Wayne, excuse me.
You're
Wayne,
muted,
you're
Wayne.
muted.
Okay. When I turn my computer on, I get this thing pops up after it gets through checking for updates, and it says system program problem detected. Do you want to report the problem now? Well, it gives you a chance of either cancel or report the problem, but doesn't tell you what the problem is.
You're on Linux right now?
Yeah, 22.3.
Okay. They don't always clearly state what the problem is. They're just having a hiccup of something running on your system, and they can't give you always the details. The information usually for that is in the log files, and you have to go through a lot of stuff to find what error occurred, and it gives you an idea of what failed. could be a service. It could be an actual program. I've seen that happen before, even with Zoom.
Well, when I searched on the internet, it told me about that this sometimes happens when you do a major upgrade, which I did recently. You know, a couple months ago, I upgraded to 22.3, and I don't remember this showing up in that time, but just recently, this just started up, and it told me to wipe out whatever it was, uh, all these error codes.
Hmm. I'm not sure exactly why it would show up now. One thing that I mentioned before the meeting started was that I have recently experienced on 22.3 that what happened was that I have some third-party software that's running, and sometimes during an upgrade and or a version upgrade, like say going from 22.x to 23, it may shut off some things that were working to stop them from interfering with the update or upgrade. And so it doesn't turn them back on automatically usually. I've had very good luck not to have this problem, but suddenly I discovered I did have at least one instance where this occurred. And I don't know if that's your particular problem or not. When you did the 22.3, it or a subsequent update may have caused the problem.
Where do I find the log files?
Uh, God, I haven't looked at them in so long. It's not funny. There are multiple log files on the system. Bob, do you remember where the one is at that is the major one that would give him the error information?
On Mint, you have in the update manager. Let me see what there is. No, offhand, I know nothing about it because I haven't run into that particular issue. Here's what I do after a major upgrade. I go into the terminal and run sudo apt update. Then sudo apt upgrade, especially if update says dash dash upgradable. If there's anything upgradable, you may need to do some upgrades of packages to get them to work.
Yeah, you
That work in the update manager?
well, no, what he's talking about is you bring up a terminal. You put in sudo apt update to get the catalog of what updates are available up to date. Then you do a sudo apt upgrade like you're doing a manual updating of your system. It'll go through, look at everything, and right near the end when it says it's all done, it may tell you in one line that there were some updates that are upgradable but were not done.
So update manager doesn't take care of that then?
No, if this situation does occur, regular updating through the Shield update program will not tell you about those. It will not correct those. And it's something that you have to go through the manual terminal process. That's why you can't in Linux dismiss terminal, because once in a while something odd comes up And like Bob's pointing out, you might have some upgradable patches that did not go in, and you have to follow instructions to get those upgradable uh, patches installed.
Okay, guys, I found where it is. Go to the Linux Mint, the start button, and search for system information. Subtitles, troubleshoot problems. And it will show your general system information, USB, GPU, PCI, BIOS. Below that are two items you want to look at: system reports and crash reports. That's on the left-hand navigation column in the pop-up window.
Do you see that, Wayne, what he's talking about?
I was trying to get to the system information.
System information. Just type it into the search. It has a red exclamation mark inside a box.
When you
That's its icon.
all you have to
And
do
pull
is
that up. Just click on it, pull it up.
Yeah, I got it now.
Look down the left-hand column.
Yeah,
Maybe hit the refresh button, the refresh loop, and then go down to system reports,
yeah,
and then go down to crash reports. You should have a few.
okay. Crash report's not available. To enable crash reporting, install system stmd-core dump and reboot your computer.
Ooh, you've got a problem. Your system D has somehow disabled itself. That's going to cause a lot of issues.
yeah,
It's gotten either disabled or messed up.
yeah. System D is, shall we say, the state governor of your system, and how you're actually running right now. That's a good question, because it's saying I've got a serious problem going on right now. What you may need to do is reinstall just the root directory, telling it you also have a home directory, etc. And if you haven't gone through that, you may have to get a hold of me, and I'll walk you through it. It's not,
Okay,
once it's done, once you do it, it's pretty easy and straightforward to remember, because you're in a kind of a crisis situation. Then when you're done rebuilding it, you have to do another update of the system to get totally up to date. So it's a lot of fun.
okay.
And
Now,
this kind of issue is one reason why I not only I make it possible to reinstall the system without losing the home directory, but also I make sure I have the markings for the software. I use the Synaptic Software Manager to do that. So most of the software I've got installed, I've got markings saved and I can import them. That shortens up rebuilding a lot
well,
if you use a lot of different packages.
Well, one thing that I am doing on some of my systems, not all of them, is I'm also breaking out the /var into its own partition like home. And the reason for that is two key things go into the var. One is flat packs. And on this system, I think I got 20 some flat packs at the moment. And number two is if you do any virtual machines, the virtual machines go into the var folder also. So that's something, depending on the amount of storage you have on your system, can be accommodated after the fact, but it's a little bit of a routine that you have to go through And I'd rather not during the meeting try and address that particular issue.
Okay,
If anything, if you need help, then you're going to have to contact me, and I might record what we do and then edit that after the fact, and that way I can make that video available.
okay.
All right. Now, anybody got any other problems, issues, comments, etc.? Let's see if I can get my head around this. And come on. Ooh, can I get you out of the way? No, I can't move you. All right, we'll do it this way. All right. Now, in the vein of prior months, I'm going to bring up the software manager, and we're going to look at some of the various things that I have found out about, because a lot of people do not go through much in the software manager to know what is available to them. Now, one of them is Proton Plus, and it's multi-platform gaming, and I think that's you have to do an outside URL. Yeah, that one, Proton Plus, you have to get from an outside search in a browser. And I didn't check it out ahead of time. Box Buddy is the next one. Box Buddy is a flat pack. And basically, oops, boy, they're not even giving me, it's a graphical distro box manager. And it gives you a graphical interface for distro box management of space requirements. So you'll have to look at this one and see if it might be one that would help you out with what you want to do on your system. Next one I got is CONVERSEEN. It's an image converter. Oops, didn't. CONVERSEEN. Okay, and there are two. You have looks like a native install, and you have a flat pack install. Let's look at the native one. And it says you can convert an unlimited number of images and or create thumbnails to any and of most popular formats like DPX, EXR, GIF, JPEG, JPEG 2000, PDF, photo CD, PNG, PostScript, SVG, and TIFF. So there's another package, and you have the choice of a system install on this one or the flat pack version. It depends upon what you would like to have as far as stability with a flat pack or possible conflicts that could arise with a native installed package. A lot of people want to stick with native installed packages as much as possible, and use flat packs only if they have to. And I keep hearing some that Snaps pack, predominantly Conical's Ubuntu systems, may have some kind of security problems with them, so you might want to consider changing to flat pack if you really need to. I have only one Ubuntu Cinnamon version, community created, and I was having troubles with the Brave browser because it was only available as a snap package. So I finally removed it from the system. I installed Flatpak support. I then downloaded Brave browser from Flatpak and have not had any issues whatsoever with it. So good luck. That's all I can tell you on that one. Next is Notes Nook. This is a flat pack only. It's Notes Nook is a free as in speech and open source note taking app focused on user privacy and ease of use. To ensure zero knowledge principles, Note Nook encrypts everything on your device using well, I'll let you guys look at that one. That's XChaCha 20 Poly 1305 and Argon 2, which I've never heard of either one, but I'll assume it has to do with encryption. So that's another one. And next is just plain Notes. Whoops. And Notes Nook shows up here too. And Notes is right here, this one. It's flat pack only. And this one here says Notes is an open source and cross-platform note-taking application that is both beautiful and powerful. Features include a native app written in C++ with Qt. Turn your markdown task into a beautiful Kanban board, fast and beautiful, fully open source and cross-platform with Linux, Mac OS, and Windows, completely private, tracks nothing, folders and tags, organize your ideas hierarchically using nested folders and universal using tags. Markdown support, format text without lifting your hand from the keyboard. Different themes, switch between light, dark, and septa. Feed your view, select multiple notes, and see them all one after another in the editor. Also runs in a background using hotkey, super key /plus, shift /plus, and N to summon notes. Boy, if you got to do all that, wow. At any rate, that's another option you've got. Another one is called Snapper. Okay, Snapper is a command line, it looks like, snapshot management tool, but it also has a GUI to make it easy so that you don't have to be in a terminal to do this. So it is saying Snapper is a tool For Linux file system snapshot management, apart from the obvious creation and deletion of snapshots, you can compare snapshots and revert differences between snapshots. In simple terms, this allows root and non-root users to view older versions of files and revert changes. That sounds interesting. And then if you get the GUI, you can do that from your desktop without much difficulty. Next up is oops, I keep forgetting to get that in there. MPEG. This is a backbone program, and it's for transcoding. FMPEG is the leading multimedia framework able to decode, encode, transcode, mux, and demux, stream, filter, and play pretty much anything that humans and machines have created. It supports the most obscure, ancient formats up to the cutting edge. And if I remember right, there is some kind of licensing that has to be done by the distro. Otherwise, they cannot have this package installed on their system. And next, I don't know how many of you might get something out of this one. G++. And I gotta find it where it's at. Here, down here, clear down here. This is a C++ compiler. I doubt if many of you, I tinkered with a little bit of C++ years ago. God knows if I remember any of it. And so I probably would be one of the few that would even consider looking at that. But I bring it to your attention because it's some of the stuff that I come across that a lot of people don't know about. The next one is called CopyQ. CopyQ is a flat pack, and it also has looks like a native pack. I'm going to look at the native pack, and this CopyQ monitors system clipboard and saves its content in customized tabs. Saved clipboard can be later copied and pasted directly into any application. And they go through some of the items that can be done and features, which I'm not going to go in depth on. And the last one for this month, Gallery-DL. Gallery DL is a native package, and it is a command line program to download image gallery and collections from several image hosting sites. It is a cross-platform tool with many configuration options and powerful file naming capabilities. Oops. All right. So that's it for the month of stuff that's in Software Manager you may have been unaware of, and hopefully one of these programs might be of great interest to some of you. Some of this is available in KDE Neon as well. Now, offhand, does anybody have any further questions, or I'll go on with the presentation? Hearing nothing. because you guys are so talkative. All right, now. Oop, I forgot. Darn sound.
Not a single company announcing a revolutionary device, and not a sudden collapse of a competitor. It's quieter than that, but far more profound. 2026 becomes the year the world finally realizes that Linux is no longer the alternative. It is the foundation. For decades, Linux has been the invisible engine powering the modern world. From servers and supercomputers to smartphones and smart TVs, it has quietly dominated the infrastructure layer of computing. The majority of the internet runs on Linux. The cloud runs on Linux. Android, built on the Linux kernel, powers billions of devices. But for a long time, on the desktop and in mainstream consumer awareness, Linux remained the outsider. It was the system for developers, sysadmins, hobbyists, and enthusiasts. It was powerful, yes. Flexible, absolutely. But mainstream, nochi, kitsch. In 2026, that perception shifts dramatically. To understand why, we have to look at the slow buildup that led to this moment. Over the years, the Linux kernel evolved at a pace unmatched in the industry, maintained by thousands of contributors around the globe and guided by the steady leadership of Linus Torvald. The kernel matured into one of the most robust and adaptable pieces of software ever created. Every release brought performance improvements, hardware support expansions, and deeper optimizations for everything from embedded systems to high-performance servers. At the same time, the ecosystem around Linux flourished. Distributions like Ubuntu made Linux approachable for beginners. Fedora pushed innovation forward with cutting-edge technologies. Arch Linux empowered power users with unmatched control. Debian remained the rock-solid backbone of countless systems. Linux Mint focused on comfort and familiarity for users transitioning from proprietary systems. And Pop_OS carved out a space among developers and creators with thoughtful design and hardware integration. For years, these distributions grew steadily but quietly. Then came the tipping point. By 2026, three major forces converged: shifts in hardware manufacturing, radical changes in software distribution, and growing global concern about digital sovereignty and privacy. Together, they create the perfect storm for Linux to move from the margins to the mainstream. The first catalyst is hardware. In the early 2020s, chip design underwent a revolution. ARM-based processors gained dominance not just in smartphones, but in laptops, servers, and even workstations. Companies began designing their own silicon, optimizing for efficiency and integration. Linux, with its modular architecture and open development model, adapted rapidly. Support for new architectures landed upstream quickly. By contrast, proprietary operating systems struggled to keep up with the diversity of hardware. By 2026, most new consumer laptops shipped with firmware and drivers that are Linux. Manufacturers, tired of restrictive licensing agreements and increasingly complex compliance requirements, began collaborating directly with the Linux community. Out-of-the-box compatibility became the norm, not the exception. Wi-Fi works, GPUs work, touchpads, fingerprint readers, high DPI displays all work seamlessly on modern distributions. Gaming, once the Achilles heel of Linux, transforms dramatically. Valve's investment in Proton and the continued evolution of compatibility layers mean that the majority of major titles run flawlessly. Game studios, recognizing the growing user base, start releasing native builds more consistently. In 2026, the idea that you can't game on Linux sounds like something from another era. The second force is the transformation of software delivery. Containers, Flatpaks, and sandbox application models become standard across the industry. Developers increasingly target cross-platform frameworks and web-based Electron Aplicativos, progressive web apps, and containerized desktop applications reduce the friction of supporting Linux. Meanwhile, native toolkits like GTK and Qt continue to evolve, delivering polished user experiences. Package fragmentation, once criticized as Linux's weakness, becomes its strength. Universal formats allow developers to ship once and run anywhere. Security improves as sandboxing isolates applications. Enterprises appreciate the control auditing capabilities and reproducibility of Linux environments. And then there's the cloud. By 2026, nearly every serious workload runs in some form of container or virtualized infrastructure. Kubernetes clusters, edge nodes, AI pipelines, all overwhelmingly, developers building in the cloud are already building for Linux by default. When they spin up a local development environment, Linux feels natural. The line between server and desktop blurs. Running the same container stack locally that you deploy in production becomes a standard workflow. In universities, Linux becomes the default teaching platform for computer science programs. Students learn shell scripting, Git workflows, container orchestration, and system internals on Linux machines. As this generation graduates and enters the workforce, they bring their preferences with them. Organizations adapt accordingly. But perhaps the most profound change in 2026 is cultural. Around the world, governments and institutions grow increasingly wary of dependence on closed ecosystems controlled by a handful of corporations. Data sovereignty becomes a major political issue. Public sector migrations to Linux accelerate, not just for cost savings, but for transparency and control. When a government deploys Linux, it can audit the code, it can customize the system, it can maintain independence. In 2026, several high-profile national initiatives adopt Linux as their official desktop platform for public administration. Media coverage shifts the narrative. Linux is no longer a hobbyist tool. It is infrastructure for nations. Artificial intelligence also plays a role. AI development frameworks and machine learning toolchains are overwhelmingly optimized for Linux environments. Researchers and startups alike standardize on Linux for performance and flexibility. GPU drivers, container stacks, and distributed training systems are most mature on Linux. As AI becomes embedded in everyday applications, Linux becomes the invisible backbone of intelligence itself. For content creators, the landscape changes to creative software once locked to proprietary systems expands its reach. Open source alternatives mature significantly. Video editors, 3D modeling tools, audio production sweeps many reach, feature parity with commercial counterparts. Hardware acceleration and color management improve dramatically. Professional creators begin to take Linux seriously, not as an experiment, but as a viable primary workstation. Security becomes another decisive factor. In an era of escalating cyber threats, ransomware, and supply chain attacks, Linux's permission model and open development practices stand out. Enterprises invest heavily in hardened Linux deployments, mandatory access control systems, secure boot chains, and reproducible builds become standard features rather than niche enhancements. By mid-2026, analysts begin to notice a measurable shift in desktop market share. It's not explosive, but it's steady and undeniable. The growth curve bends upward. Tech media that once ignored Linux now publishes regular coverage. Hardware vendors advertise Linux compatibility as a selling point. What makes 2026 different isn't just technical maturity, it's alignment. For the first time, hardware, software, education, enterprise, and public policy all align in Linux's favor. There are still challenges. Fragmentation remains a philosophical debate within the community. User experience varies between distributions. Documentation can be uneven, but the narrative has changed. Instead of asking whether Linux is ready for the mainstream, people ask which distribution fits their needs. The open source development model proves to be uniquely suited for the pace of modern innovation. Thousands of contributors iterate in parallel. Security vulnerabilities are identified and patched rapidly. Transparency builds trust. In an age where trust in technology companies is fragile, openness becomes a competitive advantage. 2026 becomes the year Linux stops trying to imitate other operating systems. It embraces its identity fully. Desktop environments evolve with distinctive philosophies. Wayland becomes the default display protocol across most distributions, delivering smoother graphics and better security isolation, system initialization, systems standardize and stabilize. Boot times shrink to mere seconds. The community itself matures. Online discourse becomes more welcoming. Documentation improves. Onboarding tools simplify installation and configuration. Graphical utilities handle tasks that once required terminal commands without removing the power of the command line for those who want it. Meanwhile, companies built around Linux thrive. Enterprise support contracts expand. Cloud providers double down on Linux-based services. Consulting firms specialize in migration strategies. Startups choose Linux, not because it's free, but because it's strategic. Perhaps the most poetic shift in 2026 is psychological. For years, Linux users described their choice defensively. They explained compatibility workarounds. They justified missing features. In 2026, that tone changes. Linux becomes aspirational. Developers recommend it confidently. Students install it out of curiosity and keep it out of preference. And through it all, the kernel continues its steady evolution. Release after release, improvements accumulate. Power management improves battery life on laptops. Scheduler enhancements optimize multi-core performance. File system innovations increase reliability and speed. By the end of 2026, when analysts look back at the year, they don't point to a single event. There was no dramatic announcement declaring Linux the winner. Instead, they see a convergence of trends that reached critical mass. Linux in 2026 represents something larger than an operating system. It represents a philosophy that finally aligns with the needs of the moment. Openness in an age of opacity, collaboration in an age of consolidation, adaptability in an age of rapid change. The year everything changes isn't about Linux conquering the world. It's about the world catching up to Linux. And once that shift happens, there's no going back.
The ThinkPad.
Okay, any questions on that one? It's a little over-optimistic, but another thing that they were bringing up with all the things that rely upon Linux already, they didn't include automobiles. And automobiles have lots of computers in them, and most of them also have a Linux kernel at minimum, so try and get around without the computers in your car working. Good luck. And especially for Kayode, there's a handout that I give everybody a chance to get at the end of the meeting. It has a lot more on it than what I will go over here in the meeting.
Okay, thanks for that. Should I send it my email or how do I get it?
Well, I have a list of articles and YouTube videos, etc., that have URLs, and I'll hand that out at the end of the meeting through the chat.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's been happening for a while, I haven't actually made a dedicated video on this. Can I just rant about the absolute state of the PC industry right now? And frankly, not even just PCs, just consumer electronics in general. If you're someone that likes tech, or if you're someone who is just getting interested in tech and, maybe you want to build your first computer, this is a horrible time to do so. This is an awful time to do so. I'm a Linux gamer, and obviously I care about things like the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck did an absolutely phenomenal thing for both Linux gaming and the Linux desktop in general. Obviously, Proton already existed, but it showed the regular gamer that Linux is actually viable for gaming, as long as you don't play, multiplayer competitive nonsense. Everything else, great experience, it's amazing, and things have been getting better. Even though when it first launched, it was in the middle of a global supply chain shortage. And now, we don't have a global supply chain shortage, we have a global RAM shortage and a global flash storage shortage. And now, the Steam Deck is just not in stock in most of the world. There are still third-party sellers that are selling the Steam Deck, but those are obviously going to dry up eventually. There's going to be secondhand sellers, things like that. So there's going to be some, stock floating around, but you just can't easily buy a Steam Deck right now, which what does that mean for the Steam machine? How much of this is Valve taking any allocation they had and then moving it over to the Steam machine? And how much of this is Valve just not having anything to build anything? We don't know what's happening with the Steam machine because Valve is being relatively quiet about it, and I understand why, because I don't think they know what's happening either. They probably have some numbers that are floating around, some ideas of what's going on, but until they are ready to launch something, it's really hard to commit to anything right now. So they put out this post a little while ago, basically trying to answer some of the questions like pricing and timing and things like that, and pretty much what they said is, due to RAM pricing, we don't know. Due to storage pricing, we don't know. I'm sure they had like a relatively sane price in mind initially. But when you talk about PC-like pricing now, that's well over $1,000. And all of this is because of absolutely ridiculous RAM and also flash storage pricing, primarily being caused by a massive demand for AI data centers. Prime example of that, OpenAI secured roughly 40% of the world's RAM supply for their Stargate project, and that lasts, I believe they have it until like 2028 or something stupid like that. And that's just one project and one company. There are lots of others, and if you're making RAM, I understand why you're not selling to consumers, and if you are, you're raising the price, because you have guaranteed sales going right to the AI companies, going to the AI data centers. If you're a company, like, that is logically the thing you would do. Now, I do wish they would up production, and this would become less of a problem. But this is the state we're in. What makes this especially bad is whilst you as a consumer might go and buy your RAM DIMMs from all of these different companies, when we talk about the actual production of the RAM chip modules that go on the DIMMs, there's basically 3 companies that do 90% of the world's production. That is Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron, who also make the RAM for your GPUs, who also make not as much, but together a majority of the flash storage modules, closer to 60-65%. We are seeing DDR5 pricing go upwards of 4x the price within a year. Modules that you bought, like, January last year, let's say it was $200. $800 for the exact same thing. Now, there is some very recent reports of minor price drops in Europe. This literally just happened like 2 days ago. I wouldn't put too much stock in this. A lot of people are going to see this and be like, oh my god, prices are finally coming down. This is amazing. Prices are coming down. Firstly, it's a small drop. It's still upwards of 4x the price. It's just not 5x the price anymore, so that's something at least. Also, my expectation is they literally cannot sell it at that price, so people are just not buying it. And we'll get more to that in just a minute. Also, I would expect that a lot of the people that were buying RAM anyway probably have stopped panic buying. So with less panic buying, there's less of a sort of push to raise the price even further. Without long-term data, it's really hard to say exactly what is happening here, but I really don't think prices are going to just come back down, let alone come back down to where they were. I don't think prices are ever going back to where they were. We're not going to see prices like this anymore. What's going to happen is prices will come down eventually, but I expect still probably minimum double the price. Probably even more than that. There's no world where you're seeing things return to how they were. You know what happened with GPU prices post-COVID. Things are not going back to the way they were. Things have been getting so bad that for a while, people were buying up SODIMM modules, which is laptop RAM, and then using an adapter to run that in their desktop system. It technically sort of works. It can be a little unstable, but at least at the time, it hadn't yet been hit by the price hike, at least anywhere near as much. Even now, it has gone up. It's just not as much because there's just way less interest in laptop memory, and getting it working is a bit rough. As for regular desktop RAM, a lot of people aren't even considering GDDR5 platforms. A lot of them are just staying on DDR4, but even then, we are seeing people who are building DDR3 machines. People are buying DDR3 motherboards, DDR3 memory, older CPUs that use a DDR3 motherboard, and we're seeing price rises there. Now, the thing is, for a lot of people, if you're not doing, like, rendering, you're not playing the most up-to-date games or the highest settings, if you just need a computer, frankly, a DDR3 machine is actually totally fine. Now, for some reason, and I don't know how people had this much copium, there were people going around saying Chinese RAM was gonna save the day. Chinese RAM, it's so much cheaper. It works in a regular motherboard. Oh my god, we just buy Chinese RAM and then everything is good. So China has some domestic manufacturers that weren't really selling globally. As such, hadn't really been hit by the price hikes, and it's just regular RAM. It's by some companies that exist in China. People started buying the RAM, and hey, guess what happened when they started selling more outside of China? They just sold at market rate, and then the discount is just gone. What I will say is having more manufacturers of RAM is going to put global supply chain pressure on RAM pricing, and probably will affect pricing to some extent. However, there are AI companies in China, and Chinese AI companies are going to want RAM as well, so they're not going to just sit back and just ignore a local supplier. So this idea that Chinese RAM would save the day just didn't even make any sense as a premise. Now, RAM has been the main focus because RAM has been the most affected by the problem. But flash memory, again, is made by mostly the same companies, and also has been having a price hike. This means your 2.5-inch SSDs, your M.2 drives, fun stuff like this. It also means any devices that happen to have flash storage, like, you know, phones, and everything else that has storage, basically, because pretty much no one is using a spinning metal disk, especially in a device that is supposed to be portable. It's been nowhere near as bad. We've seen price hikes in the range of 30 to 60%, sometimes worse depending on the region. I recently had to buy a new drive. It was 400 Australian dollars for a 2 terabyte drive. I was not happy about it, but I had to buy it. I needed the drive. And that's the problem, right? I needed a drive. I needed my computer to be working correctly. You can't just not buy it. Now, there's secondhand stuff, but because the primary new market is going up, the secondhand market is also going to be going up. Also, secondhand drives can be a little bit iffy. Secondhand RAM's definitely a lot better, but again, if you see the market is saying $1,600 for 32 gigabytes of RAM, what's your secondhand RAM going to be charged at? Probably pretty close to that. And while storage isn't as bad just yet, prices are expected to continue rising at least for the rest of the year. I would honestly expect longer. And when we're talking about businesses, right? Businesses will buy computers because they have to. But what about regular people? What are regular people doing? So we're also seeing price raises happening with GPUs, which is also great. So here's where we're at. GPUs are going up, RAM's going up, storage is going up. What about the things that don't have those issues? What's happening there? Well, prices of motherboards are not going up, but if you can't buy the RAM for it, if you can't buy a new GPU, if you can't buy storage, well, it's pretty logical what's going to happen. No one's buying CPUs, down 51% year on year. And the exact same thing is happening with motherboards, down 50%, because if you can't build a PC, why would you buy the parts that haven't gone up? And if you have a PC right now and it works, why would you leave the platform that's going to charge you a lot more money? If you have working RAM, like, unless you just really want to upgrade, you have like a business reason to do so, it's really getting hard to justify actually spending that money. For some reason early on, there was this idea that like consoles were not gonna be affected by the pricing. I don't know where anyone got that idea, because consoles have all of the same problems that PCs have here. It's just you don't really get to see the price of the individual components, and well, there's been some price hikes. Also, sometimes with consoles, the price hikes aren't directly with the console. It's going to be price hikes with their subscriptions and other things surrounding it, or game price increases, things where they can make back the money in various other ways. This is happening to the entire tech industry. Many consumer electronics manufacturers will go bankrupt or exit product lines by the end of 2026 due to the AI memory crisis, Phison's CEO reportedly says. This is a problem that is going to affect everyone. Even if you don't have a PC, this is going to affect phones, it's going to affect tablets, it's going to affect laptops, it's going to affect desktops, it's going to affect consoles, it's going to affect cars. Not to the same extent, because they tend to have not that much RAM, and the price of the RAM is very small in comparison to the rest of the car. But as cars get more technologically advanced, there's more electronics, there's more RAM, there's more storage. Everything electronic gets affected. Consumer electronics will see a large number of failures. From the end of this year to 2026, this was the end of 2025, many system vendors will go bankrupt or exit product lines due to a lack of memory. Mobile phone production will be reduced by 200 to 250 million units, and PC and TV production will be significantly reduced. Oh yeah, didn't mention that one. Also TVs, yeah, because, you know, smart TVs have lots of additional RAM in them, and yay. Imagine if you're like, you work in an artisan PC builder right now. You must be terrified about what's going to happen over the next like year, or actually best case estimates say this is going to last until like 2028. Some are even predicting out to 2030. If you're an artisan PC builder, if you manage to stay in business for all this time, I'm going to be genuinely impressed. Because if you're a Dell, if you're an HP, if you have government and business contracts, governments and businesses will continue buying whatever you charge them. But if you're trying to sell to regular people, you run a gaming PC company, I can only imagine that your numbers probably look pretty similar to what we're seeing happen to CPUs, what we're seeing happen to motherboards, possibly even worse. Another very fun thing that's been happening is there's been talk of HP having a gaming laptop subscription service, a rental laptop, a lease laptop. Leasing is pretty common in the corporate world. Lease to own is pretty common for consumers, but there is no owning here. There is, you are renting the laptop. Now, is this a bad deal? The problem is it's really hard to say that it is with the way things are right now. Because basically it is like 16 to 19 months of the price that you pay to purchase the device. And you're going to be able to get upgrades and other things like that. So I don't like it. I really don't like it. But it's not a bad deal for a lot of people. And that's really annoying to me. I don't like the idea of renting a laptop. Business is obviously different, but like a personal laptop that you're renting. But with things the way they are, I see why people might be interested. Funnily enough, also, we all know that Apple does like ridiculous RAM pricing, but Apple has yet to increase their RAM prices. If they have, it's been like a very minor increase. This somehow makes Apple a good deal for RAM. I don't know how this world exists. Obviously, they're going to raise prices with the next device, but I don't know how this world exists and how we got here. So, everything sucks. Everything is going to keep sucking, and, well, it's a really bad time to be a young person that wants to get involved in tech, isn't it? But hey, maybe, just maybe, this is the excuse for people to write good optimized code. If they don't have fast hardware, they gotta make it work somehow. That's my copium. That's my hopium. It's not gonna happen, but hey, maybe. Anyway, what's probably gonna happen is everyone like cloud computing and nobody owns a computer and anyway, yeah. If you like the video, go like the video, go rant about your
Okay. Anybody got any questions or comments on this one? If you're unaware of it, Apple has now released a budget-friendly laptop called a MacBook Neo. There are two models. One runs $600, one runs $700. Everything's soldered in, but they are repairable compared to the rest of Apple's product line. And most PCs are not that repairable in the laptop designs. So that's shaking up the industry. So if you want to know more about that, I have published some articles on another platform about the Apple device, and including some reviews. But you're talking, the unit has 1080p display, which they haven't had in a very long time, more than a decade. Number two, there's only 8 gigs of memory in either of the models. Number three, the lower priced one is 512 megabytes of storage. The other one that's 700 is 1 terabyte. And this is all soldered in. Basically, the processor, etc., it's a long strip in the body of the laptop. It's essentially a smartphone. I believe iPhone 15, I think it was, guts. And so you have a phone that looks like a laptop, is what it about amounts to. It doesn't have cell service that I know of, but it also only has 2 USB ports, a Thunderbolt port and a USB 2 Type-C port, which only has a 480 megabits per second transfer rate. So anybody who gets one of these units is going to have one of the add-on docking stations that give you more video ports and USB ports, Type-C or Type-A, doesn't matter. It would also be the only way to get Ethernet connectivity if you're a user of Ethernet. So that's another little shocker that has come up this month. All right, next up.
Lots of development and updates in Linux this week, including some not so great ones. And that's what we're first going to start out with, as California just passed a law that kicks in on January 1st of 2027, requiring every single operating system, yes, even Linux, to ask for the user's age during account setup, and then requires the operating system also to provide age bracket signals for groups of ages in a serious attempt to collect the users' ages. The claimed goal here seems to be to enforce child safety rules, while people are rightfully saying that it's very bad for Linux, as Linux often has no central account system. It's also open source and decentralized, and there are many privacy concerns, which is a core value across the Linux community. As where is this going to stop? As under this bill, it would require, among other things related to age verification with respect to software applications, an operating system provider as defined to provide an accessible interface at account setup that requires an account holder as defined to indicate birth date, age, or both, which is wild. What in the world is this supposed to actually help, as it's very easy to bypass? Anyone can put in a fake date, as it seems to be a way for age identification instead of verification, but where can this lead to? That's why a lot of people are up in arms about this, and there are already conversations happening from vendors of distributions as other states will follow along with this. A lot of critics are arguing that this is just a privacy risk, easy to bypass and nearly impossible to enforce on Linux because you have so many distributions, it's not run by one company, and it doesn't have to even use a centralized account. Linux is also a broad term, as we've already seen in response to System 76's stance on bills requiring their operating system to provide age verification. System 76 has Pop! OS as their default distribution or operating system, as one of the developers actually responded to all this. But not only for the California law or bill, but the Colorado law and bill that is also set to do a similar thing. So this dev from System 76 commented that the company behind Pop! OS says the new laws in California and Colorado that require operating systems to collect users' ages could create multiple legal risks. It says we at System 76 are talking internally about what this bill and other similar Colorado bill would mean for our business. Any provider of an operating system that may be used in these states would have to do the same. This includes Canonical, Elementary OS, Purism, Red Hat, so on and so forth. Community developer operating systems offered for free may even be required to comply or face fines, likely directed at whomever provides the operating system in these states. This is complicated. As a personal stance here from the dev, I personally hate this bill and the idiot lawmakers who have pushed it. However, it is passed unanimously, -3 votes not recorded, in California Assembly, which has 60 Democratic and 20 Republican members. I would expect similar bills to pass in more states, and it is possible similar legislation would be passed in Europe and elsewhere in the future or near future. It's quite insane what we're seeing develop here. And of course, another good mention, I think the scariest and saddest thing about these bills are the scope they have and the lack of technological understanding demonstrated, and how much liability is shifted on the operating system providers, including those of free and open source operating systems. It is a bit maddening, as seemingly these people do not understand how operating systems get created and distributed, at least with Linux. This is a massive feat that vendors are going to have to take on in order to actually abide by the rules. Anyways, very unfortunate for everyone in operating systems, but signed my deepest and dearest disdain to Gavin Newsom and the California State Assembly. A great way to end that. Of course, System 76 will have to abide by this. Just like it was said, other vendors like Canonical, with Ubuntu and many others are going to have to do this. This is coming for more and more states and is a very unfortunate blow to Linux. Hopefully there can be a change in the bill before that 2027 deadline. We'll follow along with what happens, but let's get into some other news. And we'll start with some good news for System 76, as Cosmic 1.0.8 just got released. And in this version, the latest updates for this new Rust-based Linux desktop environment focuses on bug fixes, performance improvements, and usability tweaks, including fixes for what they've seen in app freezes, faster background rendering, refinements to the file manager and terminal with better Wi-Fi login behavior. All this development is welcomed as we see a more polished next-generation Linux desktop experience for us. I'm excited to give this one a shot and update my current version of Cosmic Desktop on Pop! OS. And in some kernel news, there's planned upcoming changes for Linux kernel 7.1, which would allow programs and applications to attach small labels called extended attributes with their network sockets. This enables desktops like GNOME and services such as Systemd to better identify and manage their inter-process communication. Developers say this feature could improve debugging and container support. Currently, it's pending approval, but it's nice to see some infrastructure work to extend attributes on sockets. We're seeing a new pre-alpha release of a text-based review tool for Linux kernel developers called B4 Review. It's nearing its pre-alpha release, aiming to speed up how code changes are evaluated. This tool is going to integrate different types of AI, including like Claude Code or Codex, to help analyze certain patches and manage review workflows. This will help streamline collaboration, and of course, developers get to choose whether or not they use the AI features. This thing has been coming through fast. V4 is a tool that many kernel maintainers use, and for those of you unaware, V4 is a command line tool that helps download, manage, and submit patches sent over email. This is how most kernel development actually happens with the V4 tool, so it makes a lot of sense why they are trying to integrate it in here. But will it be used by developers? Well, only time will tell, but it is very interesting how fast it's coming through, as we can see this video preview of how things work. Another patch staged ahead of the major Linux 7.1 release, which would allow for multiple specialized CPU schedulers to be running at once, each tailored to a different application or workload. This is something called subscheduler. It is quite fascinating to see this, as it could boost system performance on complex systems, especially on servers and virtual machines, by letting each type of software actually choose and manage its CPU time in whatever way is best suited, rather than relying on one scheduler that fits all applications. This is pretty wild and interesting. It says here, this patch that implements C group subscheduler support for schedule execution, enabling multi-scheduler instances to be attached to the C group hierarchy. This is a partial implementation focusing on the dispatch path. Select CPU and in-queue paths will be updated in subsequent patch sets. While incomplete, the dispatch path changes are sufficient to demonstrate and exercise the core subscheduler structures. The motivation here is that applications often have domain-specific knowledge that generic schedulers cannot possess. Database systems understand query priorities and lock holder critically. Virtual machine monitors can coordinate with guest schedulers and handle vCPU placement intelligently, and game engines known for rendering deadlines and which threads are latency critical. And this is where subschedulers could shine in Linux, as it gives you a more responsive load, and depending on what you're doing, gaming, heavy multitasking, database usage, whatever you're doing, this patch could allow smarter CPU usage without any type of manual tuning. Very cool to see this. We'll be following along, and if you're following along and haven't subscribed below, make sure to do it right now, and then smash that like button on the way back up for more Linux news and important events. You wouldn't want to miss them. Now let's talk about a small but important improvement with Nouveau users. Specifically, the Vulkan driver on the Nouveau stack gives us a small performance boost thanks to Z-Cull support, which has been added. This feature allows built-in GPU hardware to render scenes more efficiently and deliver a modest gain somewhere between an extra frame or two, and has finally been merged and passed into the official pipeline 3 days ago. It's been being tested for quite a while now, so now NVIDIA GPUs using open source drivers may run a little faster and a little more efficiently. You might get slightly higher FPS, a little bit better efficiency, reduced memory bandwidth, and real-world examples have seen around a 3% benchmark gain on scores. Not huge, but still nonetheless great, as this small but meaningful performance boost gives Linux closer to high quality with a full open source NVIDIA gaming experience. Keep up the great work, Mesa on Nouveau. Love seeing what they're doing. We have other Mesa news, but before we get there, let's talk a little bit about desktop environments. As we get a new This Week in Plasma, we gained some notable new features with Plasma 6.7, including some visual refinements and new rounded highlight style for many traditional cube-based applications to better match modern look of newer components. We also added the Vietnamese lunar calendar to the list of alternative calendars available now with the digital clock widget. And with Plasma 6.6.1, there's an improved appearance of large digits in the clock and login and lock screens. This is an after and this is before. You can see definitely that the shading around here is blocky and pixelated versus a little smoother here. Very hard to see, at least on my screen. You'd have to go to the website to check it out. I'll post a link in the description below so you can check it out. It's always great to see updates, including some accessibility tweaks here, bug fixes, and hardware improvements as KDE continues polishing its modern next generation Linux desktop. And something we haven't talked about for a while is Hyperland here, which is a Wayland compositor that has a brand new update. 0.54 release is upon us, and with this one, it's called a massive update with no understatement, as Hyperland 0.54 brings redesigned window layouts, new features like per workspace layouts, and a dramatic performance gain, especially when using Hyperland under integrated graphics cards. Some systems may see some frame rate improvement, others will be multiple times faster. So check out Per Workspace Layouts. It's the biggest change to how layouts have worked since Hyperland's inception. And with this, you can finally have Per Workspace Layouts or per monitor, etc., which means you can have 1 to 4 workspaces on Dwindle, 5 to 8 on Master, and 9 to 10 on Scroll. New layouts include a layout rewrite. The hyper-scrolling plugin has been migrated over to Core, and Monocle layout has also been added. Massive performance improvements, again, especially on integrated GPUs. We've managed to improve performance anywhere from 50 to 500% depending on your hardware. No more drop frames, rejoice, and definitely Hyperland users rejoice as you get continued fixes and bug improvements. A massive release again here from the Hyperland team. Definitely go check it out and update today if you're excited to use 0.54. Well, last week we spoke a little bit about GNU Hurd, which is an alternative operating system kernel developed by the GNU project as a replacement for Linux and has been extremely stagnant over the years. But we've seen high recent developments in GNU Hurd, and this is what GNU intended to originally use instead of a Linux kernel, and we're reaching yet another massive milestone after last week with working with 64-bit support on the GNU GUIX distribution, making it possible to run on modern PCs. Finally, developers say that multi-core processor support is coming soon as well, though some of the system remains experimental with limited software availability compared to Linux. So 15 months have passed since our last GUIX Hurd on ThinkPad X60 post, and a lot has happened with respect to the Hurd. So why did it take so long? Well, we're glad you asked. Usually adding a new architecture should just take a couple of commits. So what's the story with 64-bit Hurd? There are 2 problems. Hurd support was added for GCC 14 while GUIX was still at GCC 11. So this means we only had to update all the GCC cross compilation to GCC 14. The second step involved building for all architectures and fixing all breakages. Sometimes fixing one architecture breaks another, so they were chasing their tail for quite a while, all which led to a long time before they could finally get things to work. Anyways, now Hurd 64-bit is highly experimental label, but you can turn it on and start using it on a modern computer, and it's interesting to keep seeing development with GNU Hurd, as almost nobody uses it as a daily operating system, but Hurd does matter because it represents fundamentally a different vision for how an operating system could work. And that poses the question, what's next? As in an earlier post, they actually try to answer the question, why bother with Hurd anyway, as a lot of people may ask. Well, the main things are freedom, right? The freedom to run a program as you wish for any purpose, and the freedom from the system administrator. We're not going to get into this super deep. I might make another video on exactly what the point of GNU Hurd is, but it is interesting to finally see some updates from the team. As we finally see a February 2026 project update. Previously known as Serpent OS, it was a modern experimental Linux distribution led by former Solus creator Kayode, and it focused on building a next generation or new generation operating system from the ground up with fresh tools and packaging systems. So Aaron OS just released its latest alpha update, bringing major package upgrades, new Wayland compositor choices, faster build tools, and a new console-only install option. The project is now continuing to evolve from experimental to release. As you can see, what's new in the distribution here, including new desktops and updates to desktops and a lot of different choices. They did add Cosmic as one of the choices. You can now get Cosmic Desktop on Aaron OS. They've also seen improvements to GNOME and KD Plasma, so you have plenty of choices. And last month they shared how the wider packager interest, we were able to add several Wayland compositors to the Aaron OS repository, so you can choose which compositor you want to use. Many updates, and if you're ready to update your Linux experience, check out Star Labs, a premium Linux workstation with core boot firmware, so you can get away from proprietary BIOS, all with a clear Linux focus. You can get an extra 3% off by using code SAVVY3 at checkout or my link below. Definitely my favorite premium Linux laptop. Check it out today. And now let's talk about Servo updates. Servo is an experimental open source web browser engine. The core technology here just helps render web pages. It was originally started by Mozilla, but we're seeing updates to this experimental server browser engine that have finally kicked off in 2026, adding new web standard support, improved safety features, better JavaScript and database handling, and performance enhancements. This Rust-based engine also continues developing embedded web technology and positioning itself to try to be a modern alternative to traditional browser engines. Servo is an important project because today's web largely depends only on a few engines, as most browsers now run Chromium, which the engine behind that is something called Blink, and Servo offers some competition at least against something like Chromium or Firefox because we really don't have choice when it comes to engines and even browsers for that fact. So it's awesome to see that this engine is continuing to improve. I like covering this every once in a while just to see where things are coming along. And an interesting move from Canonical, the creators of Ubuntu. Canonical is saying that 2026 will be the breakout year for RISC-V processors, as they are moving to try to enable it for real execution. With the upcoming Ubuntu 26.04 Long-Term Support Edition release, it's going to be designed to support new commercial RISC-V hardware. It looks like it's finally able to move from experimental to release. The company plans on expanding partnerships with people who use RISC-V architecture and improve their software capability, as Ubuntu is clearly positioning itself as a platform for developers and manufacturers while trying to adopt this new and emerging open source chip ecosystem. It'll be interesting to see how this all comes into play, as this major shift into open RISC-V processors may or may not pan out for Canonical and Ubuntu. This is going to take a lot of resources from the company in order to make this actually work. And will RISC-V actually take off, like in comparison to how ARM did not so many years ago? We'll see how things pan out here, but nonetheless, interesting news from Canonical and Ubuntu. Pretty cool news from Alma Linux as its year in review comes to us, and probably one of the biggest things here is how Alma Linux, this community-driven replacement for RHEL or Red Hat Enterprise Linux, is seeing strong adoption. 2 million systems now have checked in for updates each week. This is roughly doubled since its usage in early 2025, and the project's latest reports highlight growing enterprise interest alongside major technical milestones. This is signaling huge momentum for one of the leading free RHEL compatible operating systems. Congratulations to Alma Linux as you continue to grow. This is a big deal. And this chart was released here, as you can see. They kind of started back out in January of 2022. Can't believe I covered it back then and it already is 2026 at this point. But regardless, we see somewhere in that 2024 mark, we passed into around the 750K check-ins. And by 2025, we were more in the 1.25 mil. And over the last year, we nearly doubled that to almost 2.5 mil. Amazing work here. And you might be asking, why is there so much interest in Alma Linux? Well, because it fills a huge gap left as RHEL really decided to drop CentOS off as what used to be the free rebuild of RHEL without a subscription. Well, Alma Linux filled this void pretty quickly as it offered a drop-in replacement with no subscription fees, no vendor lock-in, and still long-term support, which is a major cost savings for businesses and hosting providers who don't want to be locked in with RHEL and have to use their subscription services. Anyways, you can see that this is clearly paying off with gaining popularity. I told you we'd be back to Mesa as a new AI policy finally got released. After major talks, we finally see a consensus on AI policy as the developers behind Mesa, which is an open source graphics stack powering a lot of Linux gaming and desktops, they're officially working on publishing and establishing a formal policy for AI generated code. The proposed rules range from requiring full disclosure to restricting or even banning autonomous AI contributions. As this project weighs in on how to balance AI use with code quality and licensing concerns, we are seeing updated proposals in what is the first round for the AI policy at Mesa. And Mesa also announced 26.0.1, which actually fixes a bug that created an out-of-bounds memory access in the web GPU. This is an urgent security fix for this web GPU vulnerability. This out-of-memory bounds access could happen when using web browsers and is recommended that developers switch and update immediately to this new Mesa version. It also comes with a few stability and graphics fixes for AMD and Intel GPUs, along with improvement to Vulkan drivers and compatibility, of course, across Linux. Anyways, that's it for Mesa. Let's move on to talking about the Firefox 148 release is rolling out with a new built-in control that lets the user disable the browser's AI features. There is a global kill switch now, which allows you to effectively turn off every single AI feature, which includes things like translation summaries and chatbot integration, which is great as a lot of users have been requesting this, and still we are seeing opt-out versus opt-in which kind of sucks because this means by default you're opted into using these AI features, but at least you have a toggle in order to actually turn everything off. It has been a huge contention, but Firefox 148 finally gives you that toggle, which is now officially stable and you can download today. Definitely check that out. If you're not a fan of the AI features in Firefox, you can finally disable them by using Firefox 148. And moving straight on to 149, Firefox Beta is also released, 149 that is. And what's the biggest news out of 149? Well, it introduces a range of performance, privacy, and security upgrades, of course, with faster PDF loading and some improved graphics performance. But that's not the biggest thing here. The biggest news is that split view has been enabled by default in the nightly version of Firefox. You can now right click on a tab and to add it to split view, and from there select the other tab you'd like the view to split on, or multi-select two tabs with control command and choose open in split view from the tab context menu. You can see it in action in the screenshots, the new feature open in split view, and then you can see that split view. We can see this across many Chromium browsers of this and others, but this is Mozilla's attempt in order to catch back up. An interesting improvement, especially for those of you who like using split view. And after nearly 6 years, CGit, a lightweight web interface for browsing Git repositories through their web browser, has an update with release version 1.3. This update brings modern Git compatibility, numerous bug fixes, visual improvements, and optional JavaScript for dynamic features while maintaining the tool's focus on speed, simplicity, and minimum system requirements. It's amazing, as, again, it's the first release in 6 years, and there's a lot here. Hopefully it doesn't take another 6 years to see the next update, as we've seen 39 files changed, 641 insertions, and 394 deletions. Some of you who are working with projects might be using CGit. Anyways, great news for CGit, but not so great news for GNOME, as GitLab is redirecting to github.com. GNOME developers have begun redirecting its Git repository downloads from their official GitLab servers to GitHub mirrors in an effort to cut rising bandwidth costs. The move is currently intended to be a temporary cost-saving measure, but runs the risk as an over-reliance on GitHub does bring up some AI training concerns, which have been brought up by different projects, including Gentoo, recently getting away from actually using GitHub as their hosting platform for their repository. It's a big change, as they've officially begun this redirection. And here's an interesting change defining norms, as the sudo rs, which is the replacement sudo command built with Rust instead of C, now introduces an interesting change to sudo, which displays asterisks while users type in their passwords by default. This update aims to improve the usability for newcomers, but critics of course argue it weakens security by revealing password length and breaking decades-long Unix convention. So that's right, they enable password feedback by default. The change is so that asterisks are shown when entering passwords. It is still possible to disable the asterisk by explicitly turning password feedback off, and the claim is it fixes a major UX user experience pain point for new users. Security is theoretically worse since password lengths are exposed to people watching your screen, but this is an infinitesimal benefit far outweighed by the UX issue. And we can see that comment being made here for password feedback, and they turn the flag from off by default to on by default with this simple change here in mod RS. It's definitely a bit controversial, as it touches on how the core security behavior that's been a standard on Unix and Linux systems for decades now gives people security concerns, especially over attackers trying to learn your password length by looking at the screen or the amount of characters on your screen. And people also question whether or not the password length actually matters for modern attacks, or we're so sophisticated at this point that people aren't trying to look at your passwords. They're trying different ways of hacking your system, including social engineering and just grabbing your password through spoofing and snooping. Either way, an interesting change, as the biggest distribution out there, Ubuntu, actually ships now with sudo rs by default. So with 26.04, I believe we will be seeing this new change by default. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. And I want to talk a bit about systemd version 260, as it comes with some big changes. The release Canada 1 is now officially out, and it's marking a major update for Linux, as it's officially dropping support for legacy System 5 init scripts and requires native systemd services to be used instead. The update also introduces a new mstack feature for advanced file system layering and officially raises the minimum kernel requirements. And what does this actually mean for users? Well, old style Linux startup scripts will no longer work with systemd 260 and above. Before, systemd used Linux scripts that were in things like etc initd, and it dates way back to Unix designs in the 80s and 90s. And now we're replacing it with a modern approach with systemd unit files that are located in things like etc systemd system. And for many users, nothing's going to break, as major distributions already moved away away from System 5 and its scripts long ago. But there is perhaps some old or legacy software that may break as if their install scripts are still in etc initd. If you don't update and move your scripts over, basically they will fail to boot and appear missing by the system. And in an interesting move from FreeBSD, as Linux already has official support for using Rust in the Linux kernel in order to program, FreeBSD is also making a real push to bring Rust into its kernel. And 2026 might actually be the year it becomes stable enough for developers to use and build drivers with Rust. In the Q4 2025 report here, called Kernel Rust Support, the project says that Rust kernel programming interfaces are getting close to usable, and is aiming for early 2026 to actually get the programming interfaces to work properly, and trying to build momentum to modernize FreeBSD with Rust. Currently, the Rust KPIs are under development and not very stable, but at some point in early 2026, the Rust KPIs should be stable enough for interested developers to try writing code with them, and a shot for trying to make 2026 the year of Rust in FreeBSD. It's a very interesting move, as we experience pains in the Linux kernel actually trying to introduce a whole nother language with concerns of fragmentation and licensing support, and this is clearly a long-time game move that they're hoping will improve security, reliability, and be able to introduce new contributors to the project, much of the same stuff that Linux touted at the beginning. We'll see how this plays out. But I want to end the news with one cool general optimization for the Linux kernel, as Linux kernel developers are now preparing major scheduler improvements for upcoming Linux 7.1, and this will dramatically reduce the overhead of high-resolution HR tick timer. The optimizations would allow for a precise timing feature to be enabled by default and deliver noticeably better responsiveness and performance, especially on multi-core systems and virtual machines. And for a very simple breakdown here, Linux uses this HR tick timer, which is a very precise timer, to decide exactly when to switch tasks on the CPU. But updating that timer was expensive and tend to happen way too often, especially when using virtual machines. What happens with this is a lot of wasted work, and slower performance was generated because HR tick couldn't be enabled by default. And what this patch series here does is stops constantly resetting the timer. And now we ignore meaningless changes and we wait for the scheduler to finish its decisions before updating, which reduces major overhead. Overall, this allows and makes schedulers ultra precise by using the hardware tick timer. Now we get to a point where it's cheap enough to be used by default, making Linux more responsive, better at multitasking, and more efficient on virtual machines, and definitely faster on large multi-core systems. This is awesome, as we're constantly obsessing over how to make these minor improvements which all add up in Linux, and it's one of the wonderful reasons people use Linux. We're constantly seeing these major updates. Let me know which update you're most excited about in the comment section below, and what you think about the age verification and how that will affect operating systems as a whole. Don't forget to subscribe below and smash that like button. Catch me in a great community on Discord, and I'll catch you in another video. Thanks for watching. Linux.
Okay, I have an update on System D. System D earlier this month put in age verification. About 4 or 5 days later, they decided to fork System D, and the forked version does not contain the age verification. Exactly what they got on their mind, I'm not certain, but there's a lot of resistance in open source against age verification. So I don't know if that has something to do with it. Does anybody have any further questions or comments? Dennis, I see your hand is up, if you're still awake.
I'm awake. I've got two questions. One of them was about the age verification. So does that mean, just to clarify, so anybody in January 2027 who buys a new computer, is it when you're turning on a new computer you got to put in your age, or are all of us going to get some kind of an update before the end of the year that asks us how old we are?
Well,
or is it each app, like you were showing us all the apps, like today, Converse and FFmpeg, each app has to have age verification, just to clarify.
well, here's the thing. If on your current Linux system, you create a new account, yes, you'll have to put in the age supposedly. But the existing ones, I don't think there's any mechanism being talked about that would require those validations. The applications / programs we run on any operating system would have to have a modification. It's called an API added into the code that can interrogate the age of the account that is currently using that program. So if you've got, for example, 2 people using the computer and one is a brand new person, it would check to see that the age of that person falls into one of 4 categories: under 13, 13 to 15, 15 to 18, and over. So that's 4 categories. And they adjust their application to comply with the laws in those 4 categories. Now, that's theoretically the way it goes. But here's another kicker that has come to light. Number 1, California and Colorado's law do not require that the age put in is verified. And therefore, you could lie about it and there's no real penalty per se. However, Texas, Louisiana, New York, Illinois is looking at it too, and probably many, many other states. Many of them are talking there has to be a third-party verifier of the age, and there may be penalties involved if you're lying about the age. There is a mechanism whereby, at least in some of the concepts of what's going on with age verification, if you're a parent and you're setting up an account for the child, the parent has to be the administrator of the computer to set that up and put in the age of that child. And it's got to be kept secret and secure to prevent the child from going in and making a change and saying, oh, I'm 21 years old, kind of deal. It's all ridiculous as hell. On the 17th of March, Brazil's law went into effect, and it per violation of a child might have a fine of $9 million. Now, if you got 5 million computers running in Brazil and each one had one violation times 9 million, good luck collecting it even. It would make the computers completely obsolete.
Let me clarify one point. So let's say I got a computer, and at some point they made me put in my age, and I put it in there, and I have one account. And then my grandchild comes to visit, and I sit her down in front of the computer and let her look at Bluey cartoons on YouTube. I don't know if you know who Bluey is, but cartoon. So am I subject to any
Potentially,
subject to anything like a crime?
potentially yes. Here's the kicker about it. If you created a account for the child to do their own thing and put in the real age, there's probably no issue with you. If you give access to the child with your account as an adult, number one, you're probably having a mixed profile of adult type stuff for you and the child and what they're looking at, and that causes confusion. So that is a potential problem. It could get down to many states have parental neglect laws, and some are saying some of those laws need to be modified and enhanced to include this kind of stuff. And in that case, you could be arrested and hauled into court and on neglect charges. Even though the child's not yours, it is in your house and you allowed it to use your login as an adult. And if she sees things like pornography because she made a typo of what she's trying to look at, that could affect you. I'm not saying it will, I'm just saying it's a potential possibility. A lot of these lawmakers have no clue what they're talking about in making these laws and the impact it could have. And that includes these data centers, which I don't understand where the demand for these data centers is coming from. And it's running up people's electric bills like crazy. If you live close by, it may run up water bills for cooling, and lots of noise and vibration in the ground for a distance from around the data centers. And this has been even in the news as far as that goes. So you have that issue as well. It's a real nightmare. And if these laws keep going the way they're going, this could even impact the AI companies and the AI data centers negatively. How much? I can't tell you. Peter.
Yeah, there isn't one middle schooler known to man that has not used the wrong age to create an account on some service.
Well, offhand, most of the laws do, of the laws that have been passed so far, they don't have third-party verification. But many of the ones that are in process right now in Texas, Louisiana, New York, and possibly Illinois, they are adding in a requirement. Whatever age is put in, it has to be verified as accurate. And that may come with the teeth that if you put in fraudulent information, there may be fines and penalties against you.
So if you're not the owner of the machine, because it's a school and it's a school account and it's the school's machine, and the students create accounts with the wrong date of birth, who is at risk?
That is not clear at the moment with those states that haven't passed mandatory verification yet. So I can't answer that question explicitly. However, I will say, theoretically, this should apply to state and federal government computers, but they're exempt. Whether schools' computers are exempt, I don't know. There may be a way for schools to have a blanket thing that says everybody's under the age of 18 or something along that line that says, okay, you can't touch porn sites. Even the adults in the administration of the school could not access it.
most of the schools try to do that with firewalls
Yes.
in different accounts on their Wi-Fi networks. But the thing is that once you get above 7th grade, some student in the school is going to find a back door to get to the administrator's firewall password for the Wi-Fi. And if that's the case, everything's open.
That's right. But now, see, the problem there is that's a cybersecurity issue. Even the FBI could get involved if they can figure out who did it. They and their parents might face charges. And that's not a joke, because the one thing that too often has slid in many of the past decades is the enforcement of parental laws, especially related to neglect. And if a student does something like malicious damage, the parents can be sued for damages. So gets into law, and the lawmakers, the way they make laws, they're behind the times. They're trying to catch up. They don't know what the hell they're talking about usually, and so you end up with laws that are all over the place. The federal government is beginning to look at this kind of stuff too. And the next question there is, if the federal government passes something like this, does it trump the state's laws or not? This is where you got into things like the Roe versus Wade law. And what it did was it trumped all the state's laws until finally the Supreme Court, through multiple cases, literally left Roe versus Wade almost impotent, and therefore the state laws now could be brought back into effect. So it makes one big mess, and they have no clue, the lawmakers, what the hell they're doing in putting this into OSs and making all the app developers. And under Linux, there are thousands and thousands of applications that have been abandoned but are still available and can be used. Who is responsible for the age verification of those applications and programs? The laws at the moment don't address that specifically, and that's because they don't know what the hell they're doing to begin with. Dennis?
Okay, change of subject. One guy in the video, I'm just trying to understand what Alma Linux, the guy says, oh, it went from 500,000 to 1 million to 2 million. Isn't it just another distro like Mint, or what's
No, this is an RPM package. There used to be a package called CentOS that was based on Red Hat, and I don't remember what the reasoning was, but they discontinued CentOS, and this Alma made a drop-in version, and it replaces anybody that was running CentOS. And if I remember correctly, it is a server operating system, not a desktop operating system. Anything? Okay, Wayne.
What about telephones and, iPads and all that sort of thing that have all kinds of apps that run?
Well,
How is that going to be?
is it a computer Does it have an operating system?
Yeah,
Then it applies.
they're crazy.
That's
Totally.
that's I'm saying. I don't know how to make it any clearer. They don't have a clue what they're talking about with the millions and millions of devices. But if you're a government agency or a state government, etc., and there may be some other exemptions, possibly schools, maybe hospitals, I don't know, scientific laboratories, etc., that are exempt from this. This is primarily the consumer market, and this gets into privacy and security of individuals' rights and surveillance systems by the government. Bob.
Actually, phones, because they have a centralized app store and they have a centralized ecosystem, those OSs are the easiest ones to impose age verification on. And you are already routinely asked for credit information before you use an app store that has anything for sale. Your account already contains much of this information, often including age. It just the age hasn't been verified with government ID yet. That's basically throwing in one API. That isn't the problem. The problem is Linux does not have discrete accounts. And where there are not discrete user accounts, good luck administering these laws.
I think good luck for any computer systems. And my understanding is Zuckerberg, who owns Meta, is putting up to $70 million lobbying for this age verification, because then he collects that information and is able to identify, like a government surveillance, the age of who the users are, so that they can possibly use this in some fashion down the road, either in advertising and stuff like that. Because in advertising alone, you got to understand, you don't want to have more adult type advertising going to a 13-year-old or younger person. And same for 13 to 15, 15 to 18. There are things in advertising that are more for an adult, not for kids. And so you can avoid some legal hurdles that you may be hauled into court on. But he's one of the major proponents lobbying for this in all the states so far that are seriously looking at these laws, starting with California's law, then Colorado's law. I don't know if anybody's looking seriously at Brazil's law, which is extreme. I mean extreme. They could become a internet desert. The way a law that I've understood bits and pieces of so far, nobody's going to want to sell any kind of computing device with an operating system, let alone applications. Anybody got anything else?
I just like to go on record now, if in the future when we use Zoom or any other software, that I'm declaring right now I'm only 23 years old.
Oh, I have said my birth year is 3164 in one case, and 13366 in BC in another. So let them now. If it's not age verified, by the way, when it comes to this age verification, you have to show some kind of positive government identification to prove you are of the age you are supposed saying you are. Okay. Now, here's a crux. Discord is a socialized network. A lot of gamers used to be, I don't know if they still are, on Discord. Okay. And there may be in some of those groups sexual predators and pedophiles and stuff like that. This is to try and stop that stuff, but at the same time, they were using third-party verification that had a data breach this year. So all that information is now out on the dark web. That's going to haunt those people whose information they got the rest of their lives. Because your birth date is one of the key components if you want to get a mortgage, car loans, etc., etc. And they do check that out. So I don't get where all this is going. I think it's an honest crock. And I think if, in my personal opinion, if a lot of these businesses go out of business, they have a right to sue the legislative people for their losses. Okay, I put the article list out on the chat so you can download. It's a long list. Basically collected over the past month. Okay, Bob, do you have yours?
Just got it. Oh, wait.
Yeah,
You didn't want to do it.
Peter got it. How about Wayne?
yeah, I got it.
It failed to download.
It failed to download.
Yep. It won't go to my desktop. So let's see if it'll go to downloads. Nope, it won't download. Linux Mint.
I got mine.
Linux Mint impossible to download.
Dennis, did you get yours?
I did. I downloaded mine.
So Peter, Wayne, and Dennis have got it. You're the only one at the moment.
It can't be downloaded.
I don't know what to tell you. I'll have to email it to you.
Yeah.
Because everybody.
Another Zoom issue.
This is I don't know if it's a Zoom with the other three people getting it. I don't understand. I don't think it's Zoom. I could be wrong. This is only.
It is.
This is an 18 kilobyte file.
Yeah,
I can't download it.
Interesting.
I can't save it anywhere.
you probably didn't put your right age in.
Well, I can't get it.
Well, I'll have to email it to you. I got to email Earl too, and the other
Wait a
new
minute.
guy.
No. I don't know why it won't save anything.
Can't answer your question because it's not making a lot of sense to me. And with 3 out of 4 getting it,
I can't do it.
well, I would
Just
say
can't
give
do it.
up at the moment. And I'll send it to you in an email since I got to do Earl too.
Mm-hmm.
That's my fallback to begin with, anyhow. So I just have to get that new guy's email address from Beata and see what's what. All right. Any other questions or issues? I think it's. Let me double check here.
Quarter after 9?
Pardon?
Quarter after 9, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a lot. We didn't start until 10 after, anyhow. April 2nd is the next CCS meeting for keeping up with tech. Just to let you guys know. I'm gonna stop the videos.
This is ridiculous.